We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is a seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way.
Hello, welcome to Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship's Spiritual Sustenance, our online alternative to Sunday services. I'm Reverend Sarah Richards, minister of this congregation of folks with open minds and hearts. We are all ages, all colors, all genders, all abilities, all kinds of wealth, and all kinds of love. If you're new to our spiritual sustenance service, a special welcome to you. Please feel free to reply by email or on Facebook to introduce yourself or ask any questions you might have about the fellowship or Unitarian Universalism. So today is the first Sunday of June. Our first take on the question, what does it mean to be a people of compassion? It is also the first Sunday of LGBTQ+ Pride Month. We're not celebrating Pride Sunday together with other congregations as we have in the past and as we have planned to do because of the coronavirus that requires us to stay apart. And today is the 13th day after the killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers. Compassion. To be a people of compassion means acting on empathy. So today our service is entitled, We Are a Proud and Angry People. We act on our empathy and according to our Unitarian Universalist faith to do the work, internal and public, to dismantle the political, economic, social, and yes, religious structures that depend on exploiting and oppressing African American people, people of color, LGBTQ people, low-income people, immigrants, disabled people, the list goes on and on. To be a people of compassion means we recognize how we are personally linked into these structures of oppression, and to stay in the work of freeing our minds. Recognizing that that work of freeing our minds is very difficult, maybe the most difficult work that we can do. Being a people of compassion is not about being nice to keep things calm and comfortable. It's not about feeling guilty and getting stuck there. It is about taking action internally and publicly to move all the people toward the beloved community. So let us begin this service by lighting a chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. I invite you to light your own chalice or to bring Cuff's chalice to mine as our facilitator, Maggie Degen, reads the chalice lighting.
Our chalice lighting, Love Beyond God, is by Reverend Adam Lawrence Dyer. What if every time you woke, your sigh was felt by every being on earth? What if every time you spoke, your words were heard by every ear on earth? What if when you told a joke, you tickled the senses of every smile on earth? What if when your heart broke, you tasted the tears running down every cheek on earth? No bond or brand or gilded yoke. Surely this is love that reaches beyond, that holds one to another and every other to one, no matter the color or where we're from. This is now. This is we. This is love. This is God. And this is love beyond God. Our special call to worship this morning is a poem by the same author as our chalice lighting. Reverend Adam Lawrence Dyer, a Black UU educator and LGBTQ and justice reform activist. Both of our selections are from his collection, A Love Beyond God.
Healing. Don't speak to me of healing racism or wounded souls or the painful hurt until you are willing to feel the scars on my great-great-grandmother Lori's back. Don't speak to me of values or justice or righting wrongs until you are able to feel the heartache of my great-grandfather Graham, whose father may have been his master. Don't speak to me of equity or opportunity or the common good until you are able to hear the fear from my grandmother May as the only Black woman in her college. Don't speak to me of passion or longing or standing on the side of love until you know the shame felt by my mother Edwina, mocked by teachers for the curve of her back. Don't speak to me of together or understanding or empathy until you know my rage as a young actor hearing the direction to be more Black, more male. The pain you are trying to heal has no real name. The pain you speak of has no story. It is anonymous, vague, and empty. Don't speak to me of healing, for I heal the second I am ripped apart. My wounds self-suture, and like the clever creature I am, I just grow new legs to outrun the pain even faster. It is something I have had to practice for generations that feel like an eternity. So please don't speak to me of healing, because you cannot know what healing means until you know the hurt.
And now join Bridget Rose singing How Could Anyone? And the words will be on the screen.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
It is now time for all ages, where we reach out to everyone who is young or young at heart with a message on our monthly theme. Many of us struggle to understand what is going on in our country right now. So explaining it to kids is especially challenging. It is also critically important. The free and responsible search for truth and meaning we so cherish as Unitarian Universalists starts with how we educate our children and youth. This week, Bethany Kosmicki, daughter of Rhonda, helps us understand intersectionality.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bethany Kosmicki. I'm Rhonda's daughter. I live in Philadelphia, and I'm studying to get my degree in sociology at Temple University. Today, I'm going to talk about a concept that maybe you've heard or you've seen on social media called intersectionality. It's actually a really simple term, and I think it's going to be really useful when you think about pride and other things going on right now. So I've put together a quick little presentation that I'm going to share with you today. Intersectionality was a term that was started by a scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw. It's a big word, and I'm going to talk about what it is in just a minute. But first, I think it's useful to understand something else called identity. We all have a lot of identities. We have a racial identity, for example. So you might be Black, you might be white, Asian, Hispanic, or multiracial. You have a gender identity. So you identify as a woman or a man, non-binary, queer, or trans. And you have a religious identity. You might be Muslim or Jewish or Christian, Hindu, or for everyone watching this video, you might be Unitarian. Even not having a religion that you identify with is still a religious identity. It's just that you don't have a religion. As you can see here, these are just 3 examples of many different identities that you can have. And every person has each of these different identities, which means that you actually have a lot of identities. Some identities in our society give you privilege, and some identities in our society may mean that you deal with oppression or discrimination or even violence. Identities that give you privilege in our society are if you're white, if you're male, if you're heterosexual, if you're wealthy, educated, able-bodied, Christian, or young. And identities where you might face oppression or discrimination are if you're Black, Hispanic, Asian, or any other racial minority, female, non-binary, or trans, gay, lesbian, or bisexual, if you're poor, uneducated, if you have a disability, if you're Muslim or Jewish, or if you're old. As you can see here from this list, you may have some privilege based on certain identities, but also face oppression or discrimination because of other identities. This is a really, really important point here, because it means that you might be privileged in some ways and not privileged in other ways. For example, I'm a white woman. I have and can experience discrimination because I'm a woman, but I will never face discrimination based on the color of my skin because I'm white. The women's movement and feminism focused largely on the identity of gender. It sought to make women be able to have equal rights in the workplace or at home. The civil rights movement focused largely on the identity of race, trying to give rights to Black people in the United States to be able to do things like vote and eat in public spaces and share public spaces with white people. Both of these movements were really, really good, but the women's movement focused largely on white women, and the civil rights movement focused largely on Black men, which meant that for Black women, they didn't feel that they were adequately represented because they were not white in the women's movement, but they were not male in the civil rights movement. These Black women activists wanted to capture what it felt like to be oppressed both because of their gender and because of their race. This is where intersectionality comes in. It's the idea that you have multiple identities that intersect at the same time. They never exist just on their own. So in this example, these women had their racial identity intersecting with their gender identity. And that yellow star is that unique experience that these women faced as members of both the Black community and as women. The more identities that you start to think about overlapping or intersecting, the bigger and more complicated it gets. That's a little confusing, and it can be difficult to think about our own place in the world, and it can bring up a lot of emotions, maybe anger or confusion or guilt or fear. But it's important to think about how some identities may benefit you and other identities do not benefit you, and how that creates unique experiences based on those different identities. And the more identities that you throw into the equation, the more complicated it gets. This is really showing us that every person has a ton of identities that all overlap and intersect together. And when we think about how we face the world, it's important for us to think about all of these pieces at the same time if we can, and to realize that having different emotions about different identities or different actions because of different identities is okay, because we don't just live one identity at a time. That's all I have for my presentation for you today. I hope that this helped you understand the concept of intersectionality a little bit better. If you have any questions, I would be happy to talk to you more. So please feel free to contact me. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciated it. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Bethany. Friends, even when we are apart, or really especially when we are apart, the time that we share our sorrows and joys is a holy time, deepening our connection with each other. I invite you to speak your own sorrows and joys aloud now, dropping a pebble into a bowl of water, letting your feelings ripple out to unseen hearts. And now I invite you to open your heart to the sorrows shared this week.
Sage Banks sent love and light to all the people protesting in the streets. With the risk of coronavirus present, she is worried for their health and safety. Lorraine Wright is saddened by the sudden death of an old friend, Laura Hardy. She shared stories of Laura's strength, spirit, and sense of humor. Mary Sullivan and Dan Marsh are mourning the death of Dan's lifelong friend, George Boyd. Mary Campbell shared the concerns of her niece, Degen, a first grade teacher in inner city Chicago. Degen misses her kids and is worried about them during these scary times and wishes that she could connect with them. Bob Swenson shared his sadness and anger at the desecration of St. John's Church in Washington, D.C. by the president's photo op. The church holds a very special place in Bob's life. In 1962, he and a few other architecture students measured every bit of St. John's, and their historical building survey drawings of it are in the National Archives. It was the start of his career in architecture, and he's returned many times over the years to photograph the church.
As we hold each other's sorrow and pain, we also seek to celebrate joys and gratitudes.
Several people shared that the momentum of the protest after George Floyd's killing and those involved, especially young people, gave them hope for democracy. Pat York shared that she has found it healing to be in the woods, practicing meditation and slow movement to raise vibrations, expanding love and healing into the world. Lorraine Wright had a surprise visit from a former neighbor who's now 24, who had planted trees in her backyard. He was happy to see that the trees were flourishing 10 years on and seemed equally happy to see Lorraine. Finally, Mary Campbell shared her gratitude and joy for her family after her nephew's COVID-19 test came back negative. His young child is in the vulnerable category, so it's quite a relief for the whole family.
for all the sorrows, joys, worries, and thanks expressed aloud or held inside. We have lit candles, and now we'll share a moment of silence. Now, please join our choir director, Cindy Reese, in singing the hymn, I Know This Rose Will Open. Words are on the screen.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. This rose will I know open. My fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will I know this rose I know this rose I know this rose I know my fear I know my fear I know my soul I know my wings I know the wings I know this rose I know this rose I know this rose I know my fear I know my wings I know my soul I know the wings I know this rose I know this rose I know this rose I know this rose I know my fear I know my fear I know my soul I know the wings I know this rose I know my soul I know this rose I know this rose I know my fear I know this rose I know my soul I know the wings I know this rose I know my soul I know this wings I know this rose will open.
Friends, we're separated by distance, but our commitments to the fellowship and our community remain. As we share our sorrows and joys, we also share our financial resources to deepen those commitments. Our fellowship is here now. Maybe not, the building is not the fellowship, it's the people. And we are here now and will be here in the days to come, providing a spiritual community, personal spiritual space, and supporting our communal needs. The reality of the need for financial support is also still here. Consider switching to direct deposit during this time, or submit your offering by mailing a check to CUF. The address is at the bottom of the email, or also on our website. Your offering will be received with gratitude and in recognition of our shared hopes and values.
When I come home, took a trip to where I lived when I was not myself, thinking of love long gone, faded dreams of a wealth. Familiar haunts had changed their colors, they were not the same. I saw things through different eyes as I walked alone down Main. come home, when I come home. Some friends were strangers to me. Some friends never change. Share some tunes, a drink or two. Won't you play that song again? Haven't seen you for a while. I thought that you still lived here. Let's talk about the old times. Let's crack another beer. It always makes me smile when I come home. When I come home. The old cafe is there, the same old crooked chair. Faces I know but lost the name. They smile at me and stare like they know me from somewhere. Another time so many years ago. I think I know your brother. You look just like your mother. Maybe it's just your hair or the style that you wear. You take care. It always makes me smile when I come home. When I come home. When I come home.
For this service, we are about to listen to a variety of different voices from proud and angry people, both within and beyond our fellowship.
This is, without a doubt, the hardest reflection that I have ever written for a service at Cuff. I have struggled to talk about what pride means to me because I'm having such a hard time being proud of my country and its inhabitants. So I am not waving a rainbow flag today while adorned in every piece of pride clothing I own. This is not a time for celebration, not for me. But current events do remind me of how annual pride celebrations began with riots. On June 28, 1969, one particularly violent police raid too many sparked 6 days of rioting known as the Stonewall Uprising. This is generally considered to be the beginning of the gay rights movement. Sound familiar? Many of the leaders of the uprising were part of the trans and drag community. From those riots arose activists like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, trans women of color who said no more and fought back on that fateful day. But it was the civil rights movement and the bravery of the Black community that truly paved the way for the Stonewall Uprising. The LGBTQ+ community reflects the demographics of this country in general. So we are mostly white, kind of like you use. That makes it very easy for most of us to forget that without the race riots of 1968 and the efforts of Black civil rights leaders, I might not be sitting here today proudly and happily married to my wife. The white majority of queer folks sometimes forget that we were able to march peacefully down the streets of Carbondale in our rainbow gear last June because others marched before us in protest. It is all too easy to forget that there are LGBTQ plus rights only because there are civil rights. How often our white majority also forgets that our siblings of color still do not have the freedom and access to justice that we white queers now take for granted. At least I found it easy to forget for a while there. You see, I spent virtually my entire career as part of the very criminal justice system that has allowed the police to get away with racially based murders over and over again. Even as a public defender, I developed moral calluses and callousness over time. I literally read thousands of police reports that began with the words "black male suspect." And it worked a subtle change in me over time. Oh, I told myself that I was defending the downtrodden from the police, and I really did try. But despite my commitment to justice and good intentions, at some point I realized that I internally evaluated every young Black man I met locally, trying to remember their names, under the assumption that they were either a current or a former client. This is one of the reasons that I retired at the peak of my career. I saw what years of letting subtle racism slide in the courtroom while vocally condemning the obvious examples had allowed me to pretend that I was better than other white folks, that I was doing my part. Silent tolerance for the intolerable is the norm in this country, which is why a cop thought he could kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds on the neck of an unarmed, restrained Black man while the world watched. I, for one, have not been the same since I watched that police officer murder George Floyd. I genuinely did not know what to do. Something called me to reach out to a friend from high school who I knew was a pastor in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. I don't know who needed whom more that night, but we talked for hours. I cried with my friend and I waited anxiously until she heard from her children who were in the midst of the protest. But mostly, I truly listened to a Black woman share her raw emotions about her experiences and those of her community. With her permission, I am sharing just a bit of what Reverend Stephanie Dillard of Shekinah Missions in St. Paul, Minnesota, had to say about current events. Y'all are worried about some buildings. Why are they rioting? Why are they looting? Here is something you don't understand. Black people are raised not to think in terms of individuality. We think first in terms of brother or sister. That's my brother, he had his knee on. My son, my husband. That man he had his knee on, Mr. Floyd, he wasn't a stranger to me. We are connected. What you do to one of us, you do to all of us. We don't see ourselves as separate. We are us. You don't understand that. So that was my brother you had on the ground. I never met him. But that was my son, my brother. That was him, and he was crying out for me. Do you understand? When he cried out for his mother, he was crying out for every Black woman in America. We heard his cry, and we couldn't come rescue him. We couldn't come there in the crowd and beat down anybody that would dare touch him. So that's the reason why buildings are coming down. Be glad it's buildings. Be glad that it's just buildings. You better listen. So this Pride, I challenge all of you to listen. And remember that our work as a community is not done because our work within this country is not done. The fight is not over until there is justice for George Floyd and all of the others who have died before him. The fight is not over until Black mothers no longer have to teach their children to fear the police in order to protect them. Take to heart the words of Reverend Dillard and know that we UUs must never let ourselves be a community focused on the individual. Hear George Floyd's cry and know that he is also your brother, your son, your husband. Our 7 principles do not depend on the color of a person's skin. Being part of the interdependent web of life means that what you do to one of us, you do to all of us. It is time for us to say no more.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Good morning, my friends. Reverend Sarah asked me a few days ago if I would do a reading of this poem, this viral load that I wrote last Sunday early in the morning. And I didn't know what to say to Reverend Sarah because after I wrote the poem and posted it to my Facebook page, as I often will post things that I write and share with my friends, I started to have some hesitation about sharing it so widely and about whether or not my voice as a middle-aged, middle-class white woman and my lament over all of the awful things that have happened since George Floyd's murder and since before George Floyd's murder, whether my voice is the one that the world needs to hear. And certainly my Facebook page doesn't represent the whole world. Not that many people got to see it, but nevertheless, I have some pause for myself about whether I need to do more listening and a little bit less talking. But I'm going to share it with all of you because you are my beloved community, and my minister asked me to share it, and I think it has something to say, but it's maybe not as important as what people of color have to say right now. This viral load. I woke up early and unrested, a symptom of these shapeless days, to quiet the wondering if everything is still burning. I listened to birdsong. Yes, wake up unrested, that's right. Know that even sweet birdsong is reserved for my whiteness. This began with fever, breeding in the isolation of zip codes and railroad tracks and expressways, red lines of disease that does not go away. We keep looking for vaccine. Oh, I want it too. Give me a quick dose that will make it go away. But this is airborne, particles spewed from the highest office, and it is waterborne, as Flint still knows. Everywhere it is bloodborne, and has been from the start of this United States. It mutates with the times, as every virus will. It has altered our DNA, the microscope of detection, now a palm-held computer with camera. Held by the traumatized young person, it will live in her forever, the cry for his mother with his last breaths. She does not have the protective equipment for this viral load.
My name is Mary Campbell, and I'm a member of the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship. A member of my extended family is a trans woman. She is in the process and undergoing the necessary hormonal therapies. When the corona pandemic orders were put in place, she can no longer travel to her medical team. They are helping her by contacting her by video, but she's not able to proceed with some of the medical procedures that she needs to do right now. With all the negative attitudes expressed in our society, she is concerned about how she is going to be treated when she starts going out in public. She is anxious to get out and be in public, but she's also very leery of her acceptance. Her parents are very supportive, but will be glad when she can receive direct mental and physical attention from her medical team. My family member is white. If she was a woman of color, she would have more concerns for her safety. According to The Advocate, a magazine for LGBTQ community, in mid-December 2019, 21 trans women had been murdered, 20 of them women of color. I have no idea what transgendered men might have happened to them. So right now, in memory of all trans persons, I am going to light this candle.
Before we sing our last hymn together, I want to let you know that there are going to be very many virtual Pride events throughout the month, thanks to Rainbow Cafe. The details are in the email with the announcements, or in this email with the announcements, and all over Facebook. If you need to, you can reach out to me and I'll make sure you have all of the details. Now, if you will please join in singing our slightly adapted hymn, "We Are a Proud and Angry People," led by Bridget Rose. The words are on the screen.
We are a proud and loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a proud and loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are trans by ace together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Thanks to all who contributed to this service. Musicians Kindred Moon, which are Christine Bauer, Candy Davis, and Marty Merrill. Anne Ray Griffin, Genevra Herr, Stephanie Reese, and Bridget Rose. Gratitude to Time for All Ages presenter Bethany Kosmicki, contributors Jess Job, Mary Campbell, Therese Thean, and especially facilitator Maggie Degen for her powerful reflection. And we must always thank Amy Weber for all the work she puts into making this video happen. And thanks to all who contributed to this online service that includes each and every one of you who watched the video, read the words, sang the songs, send in your checks, and share your joys and sorrows. We feel each other's presence and help each other get through these difficult days. And now please join hands if you've got someone with you, or turn your palms up to receive and give the benediction. These words are by Reverend William Sinkford, the first African-American president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. We are a gentle and generous people, but let us not forget our anger.
May it fuel not only our commitment to compassion, but also our commitment to make fundamental changes. Amen.
Now please join in singing our sung benediction, Blessings of Love, played by Maki Ito Pardiek. Words are on the screen. Go in peace with love for justice.